Thanks for listening to The Front Lounge with Congos. You can catch this live every Tuesday on our Twitch. That's twitch.tv/congosmusic. Also, make sure to join our Discord. That's congos.com/discord, Discord. A lot of fun people there. It's a great community. If you'd like to support the podcast, join our Patreon. That's patreon.com/Congos. You'll get access to all the archives of streams that we've done on Twitch, plus merch discounts and more. We're recording, and like we said before we start recording, we're going to do a official intro because I'm never good at doing those live. Even when we do these podcasts with just ourselves, I can never get the intro to be right, so I'm going to write it down and do it properly. But we are here obviously talking with Henry Phillips, who is a comedian, actor, writer, musician, someone that we've been a fan of for a very, very long time. So really excited to talk with you. And we were just finding out kind of off the air that we have a mutual friend in John Frizzell, who's an amazing composer, musician that we met out in LA. And that, I want to lead with this question. I think what drew us to you so much is the musical aspect to your comedy. So how did you start as a musician?
Yeah, I just wanted to set it up. Sorry, that we found you when at the time that you got Netflix DVDs in the mail. You know, we watched Punching the Clown, and that was our first introduction to you. And it was instantaneous. We all talked about the movie a lot afterwards, and then we kind of start to follow you after that point. So let's just throw that in there, give you a little context.
Oh yeah, no, that's great context. Well, for a second, I thought maybe John turned you guys on to me or something. But yeah, no, that's going way back. That was a very exciting time in my life. So, well, let's see. Was there a question?
Yeah, the question was that. Like we interviewed Todd Glass. I don't know if you know Todd.
I love Todd. Yeah,
well, he's again one of our favorite comedians, and we asked him a similar question because his music or his comedy feels so musical. We said you must be a musician at some point in your life, and his answer was no. Obviously, you are a musician. So I guess the question was, did you begin as a musician and comedy arrived later, or how did that come about in your life?
Yeah. Okay. So. I think I was about 8 years old when I think it was Elvis on one of these, like they were showing old Elvis stuff, old at the time. I mean, would have been like 78, but him just, I think he was singing That's All Right or one of those things. And I just thought, oh, this guitar thing is pretty cool. I'd love to be a guy who stands there and plays the guitar. And so, my parents bought me a cheap guitar. We were in New York City and then moved to Englewood, New Jersey, and I started taking lessons. And then I kind of gave it up. And then when I became a teenager and we moved out to LA, and Van Halen was all the rage, because that was all happening probably about 5 miles from where I grew up. I was in the La Crescenta, which was near Pasadena and everything. And so there was just like everybody on the block knew how to play the electric guitar and everything. And it was a really big deal. And so I was 100% all in. I wanted to be a rock star. I was like doing a lot. I remember I had a guitar teacher named Carl Verheyen, who was like and he's still an amazing artist and guitar player. And he would take me to sessions, like he did a session for like Taco Bell or something. And I was just like so blown away that you could actually make a living doing music and everything. I failed miserably. I never got good enough to where I could play for a Taco Bell commercial or something. I didn't have the nerves, and also I never really had the rhythm. I have like the joke is I have the rhythm of a guitar player. I kind of go off and do my own thing. I'm not really and that's a real disadvantage if you want to make a living doing music, whether you're in a cover band or a session person or anything. I mean, you kind of. And so I started going more in writing songs, and I started listening to a lot of singer-songwriter type people. I kind of got out of the metal thing that I was into and started listening to like Tom Waits and Bob Dylan and stuff. And I went to college, UCLA, became a political science major. I absolutely just didn't have music in my life at all. I didn't even really listen to it a lot. I just kind of was done. I was like, yeah, I was kind of disillusioned with the idea of trying to pursue the arts as a career. And so, but there was one buddy of mine who I'd hang out with a lot, who was on his way to becoming a professional drummer, and he would play all around LA. And he was sort of my tenuous like connection to that scene a little bit. And um, I used to do this gag where I would read headlines out of the newspaper and just try to make my friends laugh with that. I'd be like, I know that unemployment is crazy, and I know that uh, we're generating higher trade deficits, and I know that General Motors just shed 14% of its automotive components operations to accelerate the overhaul of unprofitable North American expenditures. And I'm just singing like folk music, and then I end it by going, "But what do you want me to do about it?" And then my friend was like, "Man, that's really funny. You should do that, like at some of these open mic nights and stuff." And I was like, I couldn't imagine something more terrifying than doing that, and trying to make people laugh. And then he finally he said, "All right, well, I'm playing drums in the band for this sketch comedy group at this place called the Upfront Comedy Club, and I really think you should just do that song for these guys, and they'll probably want you to do it in the middle of their show." And so I did it, and they were like, "Yeah, that would be cool." And so the Friday night came around, and I went up there and did that song, and it just destroyed. And it was the first time that I felt like I had done something well in a long time. So I got addicted. I started going to all these open mic nights and doing that song. I started meeting girls. It was just like my whole life just changed because of I had this little ace in the hole thing where I could go to any place and do this one song and everybody laughed. And then I started thinking, well, I could probably write more of these. Yeah. So the music, there was a transition from music to humor at some point that was kind of weird. I think naturally I just always enjoyed making people laugh. And sometimes did it unintentionally too. So I felt like
I think we might be in that transition. We just haven't acknowledged it to ourselves.
Yeah. Unwittingly, it's not conscious.
That's an amazing sort of trajectory. I wasn't aware of that. That sort of path that got you there. But do you think it would have had the same sort of liftoff and turnaround if you hadn't had all those years of music of just banging your head against the wall with it? Did that inform your sort of I guess freshness when you came back to it, and it was a sort of spontaneous, almost a surprise to you?
Well, yeah, it was suddenly it was like unlocking a whole new world, because I was like, okay, like I told you, I didn't really have the discipline to become a session musician, to sit there with the metronome and get it so perfect that it was like a machine. But with this, I didn't have to be a perfect musician. I just had to be funny. And then, so, and I could be like Bob Dylan, where his timing would sort of change based on the phrasing of what he's saying, and stuff like that. And then also, the songs didn't have to be good. They just had to sound like somebody trying to make a good song. So I was really just kind of trying to do sort of what Spinal Tap did with metal. I was just trying to be like, well, this is a guy who's trying to do what all these cool singer-songwriters are doing, but he's just getting a lot of it wrong, and so yeah, the musicianship had to be there, because there were a lot of people on comedy club stages that were doing 3 chords and a funny voice and stuff like that. I'm not knocking that. A lot of my good friends did it, but to me, I thought what was funny was the irony of the music actually sounding like, if you didn't speak English or something, you just say, oh, this is just a guy doing open mic night. It had to sound a little bit authentic.
There's musical jokes as well. Like, there's a song from there's a 2011 stand-up clip you've got where you keep playing a little riff in the beginning, or a little lick that you keep going back to, and it's just musically funny. It's musically funny because you've seen musicians do that. It's not a comedy joke. It's a music. There's a lot of music jokes in there that kind of validate it.
I spent I spent so much time in the open mic night scene watching musicians, and I just started gathering a bunch of uh, an arsenal of jokes based on what people did. I remember seeing one guy up there just really wearing his heart out on his sleeve, and he's playing, and in between he would talk, and he was dead serious. And I think the more serious you are, the more you're leaving yourself to be made fun of. And but he'd go, yeah, this next song, I don't know if you guys are like me, where you get those kind of, you get the voices in your head sort of thing, like late, and and I was just like, I don't know if everybody has that, man. But then I was like, that would be really funny to just be this guy who's trying to, relate to everybody, but he's just, something's wrong with him. And then, yeah, I had a joke about, I would always try to figure out some funny way to plug my CDs without actually saying, hey, look, guys, fun time's over. You got to buy one of these CDs. Like, I would try to come up with some way to do it that it was still part of the entertainment, but I would watch people and I would try to do a take on that. I'm trying to remember what some of them were. If everybody in this room could just go home with one thing from this whole show, I just would like that to be one of my CDs. I started doing that, and but I always got along great with musicians. When I'd go on tour, sometimes I'd open for musicians, which was actually a pretty rough gig. But yeah, I just.
Well, I'm interested to hear that, because we've always had this idea of taking a comedian on tour with us as opposed to like other opening bands, because personally, like when you go see a show and it's three of kind of the same band, it eventually gets to the point where like, okay, enough already, like let's see something different. And like our dad was a musician, used to do it back in the 60s, and it was more of like a variety show thing they would do when they were touring in South Africa, and we'd always wanted to do that. But hearing from you that why was that just a specific difficult thing, or do you think that's a difficult position generally for a comedian to be on a musical tour?
Well, I think that when people go to see a band, there's going to be a certain threshold of how comfortable they are talking to their friends during the show, because the music is loud enough that it's not going to get overpowered or whatever. And with a comedian, you have to be quiet and listen. Otherwise, the whole art form doesn't work. And the bigger the room, it depends on the venue. I think that if you were in a cool coffee house kind of venue and it was feeling more intimate, then the comedian could be great. But the bigger the venue gets, the more anonymity there is, and so people just naturally, all it takes is a couple of people to start going, "You suck." I remember doing a show in Buffalo, New York, where there were a bunch of bands, and I went out there and I was just doing my comedy thing, and like all the rows that I could see, like the first 10 rows, and then it turned into black, were just people going, "Fuck you, fuck you!" Like they had hatred, like they wanted to kill me.
Yeah, Buffalo can be a rough city.
Yeah, I just kept on going and just ignored it. And I was like, as long as that check clears, I'm good. And this is before social media, so nobody was videoing the show and then putting up. That's what's terrifying, is now those gigs will be with you forever. But so I got off stage, and the two guys that were the Shred and Regan were the like radio hosts that were hosting the whole thing, and they were like, "That was great, man. That was great." Do you guys know them?
We know Regan, I think, don't we?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. They're great guys.
Yeah. We've done a fair amount in Buffalo, and I can kind of see the struggle there. They live in Buffalo.
I mean, I'm seeing where Punching the Clown and Punching Henry, a lot of it is coming from, which is that people either laughing at your expense or getting pleasure out of, it's not like the movies you're not pitying yourself, but it's basically making light of these people oblivious to the suffering that you're going through.
Yeah.
I kind of would like to get into Punching the Clown a little bit, just, maybe you could kind of set it up if you'd like, but I just remember it had so much impact on us. I don't know why exactly, but there was such a feel to it and a vibe. And, you know, one thing I could say is when we went on tour a lot, it was 3 years of just constant shows, we took cameras with us and we had this idea we are going to make a documentary series, you know?
Yeah, I watched the trailer.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So we had this idea that, we actually did a lot of the editing ourselves, and we had this idea of creating an atmosphere like we're film people, you know, TV people, like we're into that stuff. And so in a way, I was reading more out of your movie than perhaps, you know, like a normal musician would, because we were looking at that really as like, let's make this a show. This is not just about music, you know, let's make it a show about people and characters. And there's a feeling in Punching the Clown that certain movies have where they get the sound right, they get the background noise right, they get the pace of the editing right. You know, there was a quiet patience to it that puts you in like a place. You know, it takes you beyond just the story and the plot. It kind of puts you in a state. And that, you know, I haven't actually watched it in quite a while. I want to go back and watch it after this conversation, but I have that distinct memory. So maybe if you want to give like a short, I don't know, pitch on the movie, and then how you think about it.
Yeah, I love talking about it because it's, for one thing, I think my life really changed when that came. My comedic career changed because up until that point, I was being funny in the way that you had to be at a comedy club. My living was to play at comedy clubs, and I was trying to just write jokes that were about whatever subject matter that they feel like listening to on a late Friday night while they're drunk, you know. And I didn't really have the freedom to just sort of be funny in the kind of quiet way that I wanted to be. But after Punching the Clown, I was. And let's see. Okay, so Greg Viennes is my buddy who we went to college together. He's a guy that I met at UCLA while we were both political science majors. And during the last couple of semesters of UCLA, I was going around doing comedy. And I would tell him these stories of things that would happen to me, you know. And, you know, like a great example was doing a show at a place called the Crooked Bar, and the deal was that I was supposed to get $4 for every person in there, and I had about 68 people in there. And at the end of the thing, the guy goes to his register and gives me $14. And I was like, okay, look, obviously you're screwing me on this, but also, do you see how 14 can't be the right one because it's $4 a head? It's not even divisible. Like, you should at least give me like 16 or something, you know, to make it look like you tried some kind of math. But this is an obvious wrong amount of money. Give me 12, you know, whatever. But so that was really fun. And so I would tell Greg these things that would happen to me. Oh, and then the other classic was my manager. I had a manager who was kind of a kook, and she one time we went to this fancy party, and she it was like for a guy from A&M Records or something like that, and she said, I want you to go, you know, perform at the party, you know, because they've got a band there. You can set up your stuff and go. And I was just like, it feels like I'm imposing and nobody knows me, and it's kind of weird. So at one point I was talking to the guy whose party it was, who was like a major A&R guy at A&M and everything. But so I was talking to the guy, and then I see my manager like 10 feet away, and she keeps looking at me, and she's like, she's like, and I'm like, what in God's name are you doing? And then I went over to her and I said, what's going on? And she goes, ask him if you can sing. And I was like, oh, okay. I had no idea what the hell you were talking about. But anyway, so like that was one. And there were just so many gags, you know. Okay, so Greg and I maintained that friendship way after college. He wound up going to Syracuse University to be a film major. I wound up going further into comedy. We did put together a little sort of like a prototype of Punching the Clown back in the 90s. And you could see little clips of that on YouTube. It was on 16 millimeter. And we just sort of never gave up. But all of a sudden, in about 2007 or so, Greg was a film professor, and I was full on into my comedy career. And Greg showed up to my door one time after many attempts of trying to do something, and we never were able to get anything off the ground. Greg just shows up and he goes, "We're going to make a movie. We're just going to write the script and we're going to make this thing that we've always talked about." And I was like, "Okay, how?" And he said, "Well, all of my students are actually making movies on these digital cameras. And I'm the teacher. I didn't get into this because I wanted to teach. I wanted to make films. So, I'm a little humiliated about the fact that these kids are making their own movies and I'm not. And he said, I'll take out credit cards. I'll borrow from family, anything that I can do." And that plus I have a couple of cousins that were nice enough they heard about it and they offered to kick in some money. So we raised, I think it was $125,000, and paid one of Greg's students to be the producer. And before you knew it, we had about an 18-day shoot in all these different places around Hollywood. And Molly Malone's was a great location for us because we got like four different locations out of that one. And it was so fun to make because it was like, oh, all these stories are actually happening. The whole story. There was a story where I went into a high-powered manager's office, and I was just trying to make small talk. And I was like, "So where'd you get these bagels?" And he's like, "I don't know. Hold on." And he gets, on the speaker phone, and he's like, "Lisa, can you, where did we get the bagels?" And then she's like, "I don't know." "Okay, well, can we find out? I've got Henry Phillips here and he wants to know where the bagels are. So can we do this? It's not too much to ask, right?" And I'm just cringing. I'm going, I don't care where the fucking bagels are from. But he was like trying to throw his weight around and just kind of being a dick. Yeah. And then this kind of keeps going back and forth. And she calls, "Yeah, no, Dave got the bagels. I don't know where he is." And, "Well, can you call him? Find out where the fucking this is not hard." And so there was a lot of fun stuff like that. And we were literally doing it and cracking ourselves up, with there were about 50 actors in it and they were all friends of mine. And then the editing process happened and Greg put together a 2-hour cut, which even at that time, I think we knew was a little long for a comedy, but that was never really something. That wasn't really something that we were sort of being savvy about. Like we just wanted to have the movie be good, and so this is kind of getting more specifically to your question. We did a screening of it and invited every friend that we had. It was like 100 people in the screening. And showed the movie. And I'll be honest with you guys, it was underwhelming. It was very underwhelming. And the reason I'm saying that that's interesting is because the final cut that we wound up having and the film festivals and stuff killed every time. But there's a magic of editing that was not there. And all those bits, like the bits that I'm telling you about and everything, they just weren't landing with the people that they should have landed the hardest with.
Right.
And there was one couple that even walked out and I was just like, this really sucks. And it wasn't a terrible movie by any means, but there was something wrong with the pacing of it. But there was a lady in the audience that night named Carol Kravitz, who was an editor, a pro editor. She was an editor on the movie Ghost World and some HBO stuff. Oh, cool. And she was French. So she had an accent, a pretty thick accent. But she said to Greg, because they were friends, she said, "I'm between projects right now. If you want to take the movie up to my place, we can sit there and we can edit it on the computer and we can go frame by frame." And so every morning for about, I think, 2 straight weeks, we'd show up to Silver Lake and we'd put in an 8-hour day. Carol Kravitz did this. She had a child, and I think maybe she was just sort of homebound anyway, and she enjoyed the process or whatever. But just out of the goodness of her heart, she sat with us. There was 3 of us, Greg, myself, and she. And then it was like being put into a crash course in editing because I just learned so much. We went frame by frame, and she would like things that you just never really think about. It's like, okay, well, the van is driving into the parking lot, and she's like, well, I think after about 3 seconds, we get that the van is driving into the parking lot. How come we're showing it for 9 seconds? We get it. The van's in the parking lot. And those types of things just come with experience and also a third party. Like Greg and I were too in it at this point. You needed somebody like that. And there were other things. There was an entire subplot in the movie where this Post-it note gets passed on from one person to another, and it becomes this telephone game type thing. And the way we have it in the version that you saw is basically a montage during one of the songs where we show the thing being passed. But that was actually like a 25-minute like subplot, and there's deleted scenes of it and everything. And it would go into these people's lives. This reporter was sleeping with this woman, and then she's talking about, how awful it is that this comedian is talking about, Nazis and stuff like that. And then, so we're watching it, and my friend Susie was the actress in this particular scene, and my friend Evan, and they had just slept together, and it was sort of this plot of trying to get this news story. And at one point, Carol is looking at it, and she just goes, "This acting is wonderful. The camera absolutely loves this woman, and she's very passionate about what she's talking about. Who the fuck is she, and why are we watching it?" And it was such an interesting thing because she's like, "This isn't related to our story at all. I was following you. I wanted to see what was going to happen to you, and now we're just watching this whole scene of some other shit that's not part of the movie." And I was like, wow, that's fascinating that something can be good, and yet it just ruins your movie because it's not the place for it. And that happened to a couple of my friends that we had funny lines, and they just ended up on the cutting room floor because toward the third act, when you really want things to get moving, she'd be like, "Why are you stopping here? We want you to move and get on to the next thing." Oh no, my cat's going to try to ruin all this. Sorry.
No, I mean, that's something we struggle with musically, is that you've got these things that I'm kind of notorious for amongst the brothers, of having like a bridge to a song that is great. And I love it. Yeah. And I won't let it go out of the song, when clearly from everyone else's perspective, they're like, "That's great. Get it the fuck out of this song. It doesn't belong here." And so I completely understand what you're saying. Yeah. It's
fascinating. And now there was another force at work during that editing process. I mean, the overall answer to the question that you asked is that the editing was amazing on the movie, and that's probably why it felt so good to watch. But I want to make sure it's known that that's not the movie that we started with. So much of it had to do with Carol Kravitz. But so Greg and myself and Carol would often argue about what should stay in there and what shouldn't, and we had to pick our battles. There's one moment where I have it was something that I had seen happen one time at a bar, where some comic gave a manager his business card, and the guy gets the business card and looks at it, and he's like, "Awesome," and gives it back. Like, who gives back the business card? And then, but I was like, that was one of the funniest things I've ever seen. And Greg was sort of lukewarm on it, and Carol Kravitz just she didn't understand the joke. She didn't know why it was there. And I just was like, you know what? I really want that to be in there. And there might only be 5% of the people watching it that are going to get it. But Spinal Tap has a ton of stuff. Like, it's the third time that you watch it, you notice it. Yeah. And this isn't taking up too much screen time. So I think I'd like to, so I had to sort of fight to keep that one in, even though it never really got huge laughs during the screenings. But then I've had people come up and say, "Man, I love just the handing back the business card," so There's just little things like that.
That feels like the key to a cult classic to me is those little subtleties. It's not the major stuff, it's the stuff that does fall through the cracks for most of the audience that then turns it into this thing which is kind of treasured. Cuts. Yeah, it's like you treasure that shit.
I agree. Spinal Tap for me was like the all-time, I always say that, Rob Reiner could be a mass murderer, but I'd be like, yeah, but he did Spinal Tap. It's like,
there's a couple of those people where they have written the get out of jail song or movie or film or whatever. This might be a kind of a good segue. Just going through a lot of your history on YouTube, I see a lot of this type of comment, and I screenshotted one. It just says, Jesus Christ, this man is underrated. Now, this is kind of a difficult question because I'm sure you don't want to come across as conceited, but do you ever have moments, and I'll go first, we have moments like this, where you think, God damn it, we're fucking underrated. Like, why hasn't this clicked and blown up? And do you feel that? Because it's kind of a common thread I see in a lot of your stuff is that you have an absolutely passionate audience that loves what you're doing. They can't understand why you are not the biggest star on earth.
I get that comment a lot. I didn't like it when I was younger. I'm 53 now. Honestly, there is a certain peace in anonymity. It's not like I'm not like going like no, I don't want to be mobbed by girls like the Beatles where I just want to have my privacy. It's like, it sounds a little cliche to say that, but honestly, I'm not really searching for that, selling out 1,000-seat theaters and, taking a private jet or anything like that. Like none of that is cool to me. I honestly feel, and this is, from a selfish standpoint, I'm like, well, if people keep saying I'm underrated, then I can keep telling myself that it's not my fault, But once you actually are in that scene where everybody, if you look at so many comics that blew up really big, then all of a sudden the criticism started happening. It's like I remember there's a couple of examples. Dane Cook, who was so huge. That underneath there was this like swelling like hatred coming from somewhere that just eventually sort of took over. And it seems like that happens with everybody, but I think all that could be kind of distracting to just trying to do what you do.
I wonder what that comes from. I feel like that comes from evolution. Like, some time back in prehistoric times, there must have been a fear of someone having too much power or something like that. So then there was a need to tear them down, or I don't know, because it's like a law of nature. If something accelerates like that, then it just finds the opposition that was waiting for it.
Yeah, I've thought about that a lot too, and like people that don't get stage fright, I'm like, I don't think there was ever a time in our evolutionary history where standing in front of 1,000 people meant something good was about to happen. That's just not natural.
Right.
For 1,000 people to be looking at you and you're by yourself, that was never going to end well.
Yeah. Unless you were the king or something.
Yeah, unless you were the
and even then, half the time you ended up with your head being chopped off. So.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, so I think about that. There was something about the underrated. Doug Stanhope, who's one of my good friends, and I feel like I never do a podcast without bringing him up. But I've learned so much from him. I used to open for him all the time, and but he had a great line where when people would be like, "Hey, man, do you think you'll ever make it?" Like he'd go to like a high school reunion or something, and he's like, "What are you talking about, man?" It's like how come comedy or music or the arts is the only business where if you're not
right
multi-millionaire, then you somehow didn't make it. It's like if you can make an honest living, pay your bills, and that's where I'm at right now. I love what I'm doing. I'm paying the bills, putting a little bit of savings away, and what I like about it is that I don't know what it's going to be next year. Right now, I'm really enjoying the live streaming, and it can go to all kinds of different things.
I'm going to start asking accountants if they ever think they'll be a CEO. It's just like very random.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well,
yeah,
no, yeah.
exactly.
I mean, I appreciate what you're saying, and there's something I think that is to be learned from that. And from the outside, watching Doug Stanhope, he comes across as a person that is doing exactly that. Also, like he lives in Bisbee. He just doesn't seem to give a shit about what anyone else thinks how a career should go or not. And he's enjoying himself. And there is no other measure of success, I guess, than are you enjoying and happy with what you're doing. So that's it. But nevertheless, when we're in a business, all of us, where it's about, growing or having an audience, it's like an inevitable internal battle of like, well, I want more exposure, but it can't become the focus, I guess.
I've got a great Doug Stanhope interaction. My only interaction with Doug Stanhope is on Twitter, and he tweeted, this was years ago, he tweeted something, and I vaguely was trying to joke about who he was talking about, but and I was referencing Bill Burr had a bit about like putting wrenches in your pocket and walking into the ocean or something like that, at the time. And I said something, I can't remember the details, but basically it seemed like I was insulting him. And so he responded and he said, "I hope your dog dies," because I had a picture of with a dog in my, and I just felt so proud that he just, he took it all the way to hoping I love my dog so much, but I also I have a real pleasure out of dogs dying jokes, and anything related to I think is so funny.
Well, yeah, it's good that he's toned it down, because it didn't used to be the dog. He would say a lot worse things than that. But it's really it can be really vitriolic. I used to open for him, and when there was a heckler, it would just be annihilation, to the point where somebody looked like they were about to start crying.
It's amazing because it's, to see, it's like you vicariously feel liberation when someone says something that comes from some dark corner,
because you wish you could tweet that.
Yeah, exactly. I wish I could be like that. Yeah.
So here's a kind of. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, real quickly. One time, somebody yelled something. It was drunk and nonsensical, and Doug just stopped, and everything got real quiet. And let's just say it was something like, kind of like your shirt or something. Like, I don't remember what the thing was, but then Doug just like said, "Ooh, do you hear that silence? That's the sound of failure right there." This person just failed. They were all ready to do it, and they thought, "Oh, this is going to be good," and then nothing. Oh God, I love that. That's the sound of suckage, just suckage, and then the guy's just sitting there. It was really funny, but he had the ability to just make people just feel awful.
He also felt and feels like one of the few comedians that is really able to do dark properly. Like it's particularly kind of a lost art now, I think, because everyone's a little fearful of going there. Obviously, he came up in a different era, but there's something else that he has. It's like
his suicide stuff is incredible.
Yeah, it's like a real sense of the absurdity of life at a deep level that I think. So it's not just like shock comedy. It's like he actually understands something that the world is just mysterious and weird and fucked up.
Yeah, he's a mystery girl.
There you go. He and also I think that he comes from a place that's that we allow him to, because he doesn't claim to be some kind of high and mighty person. He has a lot of humility too, so it always comes off as punching up.
Right. Yeah, I've been listening to this Henry Miller book, Big Sur and the Oranges of Hieronymus Bosch, and he's got this line in there about how the people he's interacted with, because every walk of life that you can possibly imagine, and like I'll paraphrase it badly, but he said, like, I've been with the elite and the dregs of humanity. I don't know who I'm more indebted to, and it's such an obvious way of putting it that as opposed to categorizing people as good or negative, they're all good in his mind. All of these people that he's interacted with are good. Like Doug Stanhope is like one of those dudes where you feel indebted.
Yeah, I mean, obviously when you're talking about like Henry Miller and these greats throughout history, but you feel kind of a kinship with that. Just being on the road is that you do start to appreciate any and all experiences because you start to realize like there's only so many label parties you can go to and like rub elbows with the cool musicians and still be interested in.
Yeah, we've been to like 2.
Yeah, and that was our limit. Yeah. So here's a kind of random question. Have you seen a movie called Being There, Peter Sellers film?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, I love that movie.
Okay, because there's a, again, like Jesse was saying, there's a feeling and a sense of pacing that I find throughout your films and your comedy that seems somehow influenced by that. I don't know whether directly or indirectly.
Oh, yeah, no. Peter Sellers is a huge influence. I mean, the movie The Party, which is a very different movie, obviously. Yeah. But that awkward stuff that he did was just so funny to me.
If I were to try and sort of describe it, or at least one way to look at it is this layers of self-awareness. You know, that there's a certain amount of self-awareness in the character. There's this layer of self-awareness in the actor and the writing, and these different layers where you can tell that at each layer there is some self-awareness, you know, and when they stack on top of each other, it's almost like, for me, you're having a conversation with the subconscious of the creator because you know that they know and they know that you know and he knows that the character knows and all this. And it's like, for me, that kind of has a feel to it. And Peter Sellers was like the best at that.
Oh, yeah. No, all of his stuff had a very specific tone, even if they were very different movies. And then there's another thing that happens that's kind of related to what you're talking about. Like Caddyshack has this thing where like halfway through the movie, you start predicting that something funny is going to happen, and you're already laughing just when they have the wide shot of them walking, you know, and you see Ted Knight walking up and Rodney Dangerfield. No joke has been told, but you just know that this is something that's going to be very funny, and you're already laughing in anticipation. I love that. I think the Cheech and Chong movies had that too, like Up in Smoke. You know, you just like before they even got into it, like there was something about that kind of grainy film too that made it a little bit more funny to me because it was that being treated like it was a drama or something like that, but something totally ridiculous is about to happen. So
so
maybe it's that like the stand-up knows the importance of the setup, you know, and just pacing yourself to get there, and maybe that translates to the film as well, you know.
I think also that talking about the graininess of the film, let's talk a little bit about Henry's Kitchen, which I had not seen this, but Sarah Silverman tweeted, "This is the greatest cooking show ever made," which I think she's entirely correct because it's absolutely amazing show. Glad to see, because there was a bit of a break in terms, it was about 10, 12 years ago that you were doing a lot of that, and then you took a break, and then now you're back to kind of doing similar stuff on the stream side of things, right?
Yeah, Henry's Kitchen is to take it full circle. Back when I was doing the open mic nights with the folk music, this is kind of just a new version of that. I'm gonna take the cat and can you hold on just like
we're good.
Seconds because he's being really bad. I don't know. Yeah, and it's like he's got food, he's got water, he's got a place to shit. You know, he's got everything that he can. Still sounds dreams. Like I wish I could know what it is that he wants. But anyway, so what were we talking about? Oh yeah, so sorry, what the hell was I saying?
Oh, you were saying that it was
the kitchen. So it goes back to that Spinal Tap thing. I mean, I'd see all these people doing it on YouTube. And it was the most amazing thing to me and just unintentionally funny. And I was like, well, I want to capture that. And by the way, a lot of the Spinal Tap stuff was directly taking a reference. You know, like there's an amazing scene in this Tom Petty documentary where he can't find the dressing room when he walks off stage and he gets in this whole labyrinth, you know, and then they recreated that in Spinal Tap. But I love that. So a lot of times I'll see on YouTube somebody does something that's almost funny enough to be an
Right.
intentional comedy joke, but they don't quite do it. And so I always am sort of like, well, I want to, be the one that actually does it.
Well, even just putting
Yeah.
things in like, no one thinks of a ball as a final destination. There's always more balls.
Yeah,
You
exactly.
mix it in these two balls, and then you add this ball, and then you add it to this ball. But nothing would have changed if you just went to the final ball. There's something so
Oh
funny
yeah,
about
exactly. Yeah, no, that's something that I've seen before too. Yeah, where it's like I did one where I spent like 30 minutes draining the yogurt, and then once it had all drained, I just tipped the rest of the yogurt in there and stirred it all up. And I was like, hey, what did you just do? So, but yeah, no, the Henry's Kitchen thing, I didn't know it at the time. I was just doing it to make myself laugh and my comedian friends or whatever. And I did one of them, and I remember texting it or emailing it to my friend Chris Fairbanks, who's a great comic, and I said, "Hey man, I'm not done with this. It's like way too long. It's like 6.5 minutes, but can you let me know if you think there's something here?" And I looked, and it had like 3,000 views all of a sudden, and I didn't even hear back from Chris. And I'm like, "What happened, man?" I said, "Don't share it with anybody yet." And he goes, "Oh man, it was great. I showed it to all my friends and everything." And then um, it sort of had a little bit of virality like that. And then, but I was like, well, I suppose the worst. I was a little annoyed because I wasn't done with it yet, but the worst problem to have would be people don't want to forward it, so I tried to appreciate it. But so then I actually made another one and really tried to fine tune it so that every moment was sort of thought out or whatever. And then that one went viral. It was a couple 100,000 views, and I was like,
Yeah.
holy shit, this is crazy. And but I still didn't think of it as being any kind of career. But I was on the road doing comedy at the time, and obviously at that point, a lot of people that were coming from Punching the Clown or whatever. But I remember I was in Canada, I was in Montreal, and I was walking up with my guitar, and there were probably about 7 younger people that were asking the comedy club manager, "Who do you have tonight?" And they said his name's Henry Phillips. He's had a half-hour Comedy Central special. He's been on late night, Jimmy Kimmel show and stuff. And they're like, I never heard of him. And then they started walking away, and they saw me walking up. And one guy goes, "The cooking guy. That's the cooking guy. Wait, what are you doing here?" I said, "I'm the comedian." They go, "Oh, fuck." And then they all bought tickets. And I was like, wow, there really is something going on here. So that was pretty exciting. And I couldn't be happier. I'm having a lot of fun with it. I'm trying to be funny in the way that I know how to. And kind of going back to what we were talking about before, I don't have anybody telling me what I can and can't do. And that's the best part about it. Maybe that's why I'm not like the person who said underrated or whatever. I do make a lot of those types of choices where I'm like, well, I want to say fuck because it's very funny to me that somebody's trying to teach you how to cook and they just drop an F-bomb in there. And I know people watch with their kids and people get annoyed. They're like, "Oh, we're enjoying this thing." But then this guy keeps saying the F-bomb. So, you're going to run into problems becoming very mainstream if you make choices like that. But to me, it's more important that I'm doing what I enjoy.
So how has the transition been now in terms of you doing similar type of content on Twitch? They're much longer, and I'm assuming when you watch the older Henry's Kitchen stuff, it's very, very thought out and like it's edited, it's kind of perfect. Twitch now, you're live. How much preparation goes into the each stream?
It's very I guess it's the same amount of preparation, but I just know that there's going to be no editing. Once I found out that I can just sit and answer questions, that's a big thing,
Yeah.
and that. Um, so I got on Twitch because there were a couple of major streamers that were showing the Henry's Kitchen videos on their streams and doing reaction videos, and one guy named Nim from Sweden I reached out to him. I was like, what's going on? I keep seeing YouTube comments saying Nim or whatever. And he's like, oh man, you got to get a channel on Twitch because everybody, you'd instantly have a following. And so I was like, okay, that's great. And then he and I talked on the phone a little bit. And one of the things that I remember him saying is that, yeah, you gotta interact with the chat people because that's, and I don't know if these are exactly his words, but what I've come to know was that YouTube is you're watching something that someone made in the past, and now, of course, they're all doing live. But if you're not taking advantage of the live factor on Twitch, then you're missing out on something because when people are watching those YouTube videos, they can't ask me a question while I'm doing, and that's really the whole thing. So once I found out that you could do that, then I've been having a lot more fun with it.
Right. Also, I mean, with your sort of chops and being in the clubs and all that and dealing with hecklers, it's almost like it's material. It's free material for you to respond to reactively.
That's true. Yeah, it's fun. And I mean, once you get to be a certain age, it's almost like there's no question that you haven't heard or insult or whatever. And then you have something that you can say in response,
Have you seen any, speaking of reaction videos, there's a couple chef reaction type. One of them's called Chef Reactions on TikTok where he does reactions to. Have you ever been in those where chefs are reacting to you, making fun of it and not realize, not being in on the joke?
There are a couple of them out there. I think most people, when they first started watching Henry's Kitchen, if they weren't familiar with me as a comic, probably thought it was real because that's what I was going for. The same way when I was a kid, I thought Spinal Tap was a real band. I remember being so disappointed when I found out, oh, it's the guy from Laverne and Shirley who played Lenny. That's ridiculous. I thought it was a cool metal band, and I wanted to see a documentary about it. But
I mean, our dad, who was in that scene in 60s and 70s London with Nigel, like the real Nigel and all that, yeah. He watched that movie not having any knowledge of it, many years later, and was convinced it was real for a good portion of it. He's like, they nailed it so perfectly that it was also indistinguishable.
The first real sort of mockumentary, right? I mean, it kind of blew open that whole genre.
Oh, it was amazing. And everybody started memorizing all of it. And my friend Marty, who was a manager of mine at one point, and you got to have a manager named Marty, right? But he's probably in your dad's generation, but he said, well, when I watched it with our band, we were just depressed because we had all that shit happen. We had the big record signing at the record store, and we showed up there and there's nobody there. Yeah. And it's like, I don't want to be taken back to this. This is just depressing the hell out of me. But that's interesting to me because so much of comedy to me is depression. I think it's funny. There's a movie called Modern Romance with Albert Brooks, which is unbelievable. I think I've seen that. And yeah, just how awful his life is with this girl that keeps on dumping him. And then it's just incredibly funny to me. I guess because it hurts so bad in real life, it's fun to know that it's happening to other people also.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Gary Shandling sort of, he was for me, a master at that, about allowing the sort of sadness to come through, legitimately, but you still can't help from laughing, Yeah. And even in, the documentary and just seeing sort of interviews and real life footage of him, there was clearly a real internal life going on there, and
he caught into his art.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah,
I wanted to ask something sort of in relation to LA because when was Punching the Clown? It was 2007. Is that what it was?
We shot it in 2008. The first, January of 2008, and then 2009 was when we premiered it at Slam Dance.
Okay. So part of the impact for me was your capturing of LA, and it was like the real version or the opposite of Entourage, which probably was airing at that time, and my now wife, was living in LA. We were long distance, so I spent a lot of time visiting there. And, we were definitely sort of banging our heads against the wall, trying to make it, couldn't get anything going, and, knocking on the door of the Viper Room for them to let us play and that kind of thing. And so I had that feeling of, like everybody in her apartment complex was obviously trying to make it, and somebody had somebody sleeping on a couch, and somebody knew somebody's manager, and so there was a chance to speak to them, and you captured it so well. You kind of nailed for me what that feeling of being in LA was. And, obviously you're still there. You've had a lot of success. You have a flourishing career, but you seem to have an immune system to the LA thing, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that, about how, is there something definitive that you kind of hold on to insulate yourself from the nonsense?
Yeah. Well, one thing that wasn't intentional, but looking back on the movie, I really noticed is that most sort of LA, like the movie LA Story with Steve Martin, LA satire type things, Woody Allen's one of his, I can't remember which one of it is, but there's a lot of LA jokes, but they're usually targeting the big time, it's like, the real high powered agent, the beautiful bombshell models and stuff like that. And, you write what you know, and I was never anywhere near that scene. So if you watch Punching the Clown, it's sort of the bottom feeders. You've got a knockoff comedy record label that's, I think we even say, he sold like 30,000 units or whatever, which isn't a huge amount of units in the big picture. We have a real small-time manager. There's everything that happens in there is basically small time, because that's what I know. We're talking about a small club. All of the little successes in there are small, but in terms of the LA satire part of it, so I love aspects of LA, and New York has it too. And definitely a city like Austin and Chicago or whatever. But what I like about these places is I like being in a place where, like in Hollywood, the bartender is also a screenwriter and great conversationalist. And also we never see him again because he sold a movie and now he's famous or whatever. Like there's an energy there and it's exciting. And I know it doesn't happen to everybody, but I like being around that as opposed to just being when I was traveling on the road. I love showing up to a town, but after a week or so, I was like, well, I got to get back to where everything's going on,
Yeah.
And it's so I'm a lot of people think that it's sort of like a hate letter to LA, but actually I love LA. I love the things that have happened in that movie. I think I'm making fun more of the entertainment industry aspect of it, and especially the small timers trying to get big time,
It's definitely endearing. I mean, I don't know who says it. I can't remember who says it, but basically they say, you can't do an impression of someone if you don't like them.
That's a great way to look at it. But when I watch the movie now, it's very nostalgic too, because there was literally no social media yet. There's one reference where we established that there's this celebrity that we made, Jane Crown Jones, and she's in a soap shop, and the employee says, "Oh my God, you're all," and the line that we wrote was, "You're all over my MySpace." and thank goodness the 17-year-old girl, she's like, "Don't do MySpace. Nobody does MySpace anymore. Do Facebook." And it's like, okay. And so she changed the line to Facebook. And then we bought ourselves like several more years of
relevance.
But there's references in there where she's where Lisa, the secretary, is like, oh, okay, well, I'll just call info. It's like, who calls info anymore? Who calls 411? And there was no GPS. There was bad. A lot of the plots in there were based on things, miscommunications and stuff that wouldn't have happened now. So that's kind of
interesting. Speaking of miscommunication, in Punching Henry, I feel like it's like you found a loophole or something. There's like $1 billion idea in the joke about pulling out with the.
Oh yeah.
I couldn't believe I'd never seen that take on it. Because you've seen a million things about not pulling out and whatever kind of sex jokes you want about that kind of stuff, and it was just like it was so unique in it, and then in retrospect, so obvious of a joke to make. It's fucking hilarious.
Well, it's based,
would you mind?
There's a lesbian couple that asks him to, get them pregnant because they can't get their adoption, and so he sleeps with the girl and he pulls out, and then they get all upset because he accidentally pulls out.
That was the whole point.
Yeah. So it's like just a reverse joke on. It's fucking brilliant.
And the important thing about that, well, for one thing, it's based on a real story that my dad told me. My dad was like, well, yeah, there was a friend of ours named, Jughead or something like that. And he was approached by an older guy to have sex with the guy's wife to impregnate her because they wanted to have children and he wasn't able to. And this was a long time ago. They didn't have fancy surgery or, in vitro or whatever. And but he said, but Jughead used to go in there and he would wear a condom in the hotel when he had sex. So he just basically kept having sex with this guy's wife. And it was just something just hilarious. And I'm sure the wife knew. I mean, they're basically just having an affair.
Right.
So then the idea came to like, well, let's have it not the condom because that would be too obvious, but maybe we'll just have the pull-out method. And but the really important part is that I'm not a fan of mean type comedy. Some people do it really well. For me, I always want to be the butt of the joke. And but I remember going to Calgary, and the girl who picked me up to take me to the radio station or something to do some press or something like. She literally said, and I don't know if I'm remembering this right, but she said something like, the rape scene was a little difficult. And I was like, the rape scene? That's not a rape. It's like she missed a very important part of that.
Yeah. The whole joke I think, that you unconsciously.
Yeah, she was looking at it as though it was intentional the whole time.
Oh, like, right, yeah.
I didn't need to do that. But I thought it was pretty clear that that's not what it is, that this was a stupid mistake that I made that I felt really bad about.
Yeah, like the Pavlovian training of having.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it was. But you can't really control all the time how somebody's going to visualize something. And yeah, that was another thing in the movie too, because the second movie is a little more, it's a little darker and it's got a couple of edges, roughness around the edge. Doug Stanhope much prefers the second movie. And he was actually amazing in it too. But yeah, I mean, there's one moment where it's a recreation of a real conversation I had with the opening act, who was a girl who was heavy set. And we were having this conversation and she was like, I don't know, I do a lot of fat jokes, but my friends and my family tell me that I'm not quite fat enough to do fat jokes so that they don't work. And I'm just kind of going like, well, I don't know. I mean, I think you are, but it's like, there's literally no way for me to answer, to try to be a supportive friend in that case. I'm either going to say, yeah, no, sorry, they're right. You can't do the fat jokes, but it's like, no, I mean, you're pretty fat, I think, but there again, that's a foot in the mouth joke. It's not me trying to be mean to this person.
Yeah.
Like, ooh, let's get the fat person, or whatever. So
no, I mean, look, the history of your work, I think you have a long history of proving that you are trying to be, like you said, the butt of your own joke. So, it's clear your intentions on that.
Thanks. Yeah, that's what to me, it's all about. I mean, all the people we're talking about, Gary Shanley, Peter Sellers, Albert Brooks, they all made fun of themselves,
Yeah. Can we talk real quick? I think, because obviously a good portion of people probably know you best from your character, John, in Silicon Valley. How did that come about? How did you get to meet Mike Judge and then work with him on that?
He actually, I met him at a poker game because our mutual friend Daniel Kellison brought him to the poker game, and we kind of hit it off talking about music and stuff like that. And I honestly think that in the first like couple of maybe hour or so of playing, I don't think I knew who it was because I didn't know what he looked like visually. I was already an enormous fan, but then it started dawning on me. I'm like, oh yeah, this is amazing. But so I think Daniel gave him a copy of Punching the Clown and he really liked it and he'd show it to other friends and stuff. And it was kind of that era that you're talking about where everybody was watching it on Netflix and stuff like that. I think there was also a Netflix thing where people, just to a parenthetical here, like Netflix was at that time, people were literally running out of stuff to watch. So they were just like, well, what's good? And it's like, oh, I saw this movie, check it out. And so that really helped us, know. But so then when I did the Henry's Kitchen thing, I think Daniel forwarded that to him also. And then Mike was like, oh man, I got to hang out with this guy. So because to talk about like those types of funny viral videos and stuff like that. And so, yeah, we just got together and we hit it off. And then also John Frizzell would hang out with us too. We just kind of go around and, talk about fun stuff. And so when the idea, when after Mike started making Silicon Valley, all of a sudden he just texted me and said, hey, can you do like a Henry's Kitchen type guy for our like server? I mean, I don't I don't think you can overstate what a genius Mike Judge is. He's just unbelievable. And it's like, I've had times when people say, hey, it'd be cool for you to do this. And it's not really right. It's not. But somehow Mike knew that was something that I actually could do because I've already been doing it. So it was just kind of the perfect. I'm not really acting in there. I'm just I'm kind of doing my Henry's Kitchen thing, but it was sort of like, to me, it was just sort of the perfect fit, So that's basically all he was doing is he was just saying, yeah, I think that would be fun to have the Henry's Kitchen guy.
He just added a ponytail, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, I think,
I think there's a similar patience, I guess is the right word, in Mike Judge's stuff, particularly his like the films like Office Space and all that sort of stuff to your film. So I imagine that must have been that you guys see things similarly in terms of humor. Like there's a timing, pacing thing.
Is he a musician as well? Or
yeah, I mean, he's definitely.
I would assume so with Beavis and Butthead and just the sort of intricacy of his jokes and his takes on things. It's like you can't not be a musician and have that. Insight.
Yeah, no, he was an established musician. Like he toured and stuff as a stand-up bass player, and and he's got a lot of friends that are musicians. But yeah, I can't tell if maybe that similarity is because like it could be that me watching his stuff partly shaped the stuff that I do. I mean, I was a huge fan of all of it, and then but also I don't know. Yeah, I think I get the feeling that we both grew up in kind of similar type places. I don't know. Albuquerque, I think, is where he's from. And when he describes it, it sounds a lot like kind of the place that I grew up. It's just kind of, suburbia, sort of blue collarish. But having, desires to be in the entertainment industry and stuff like that. No, I mean,
the Tales. Did you watch the Tales from the Tour Bus?
Yeah, unbelievable.
I mean, that just really hit home for us, as, the country one especially, because since then, I almost feel like whether it's acknowledged or not, he's responsible for sort of a revitalization of that whole scene, and like they made was it on Amazon? I forget or Showtime. They made the George and Tammy show,
Oh yeah, that's right.
Having seen his sort of version of it, with the real stories and the animation and all that, it had such for me, he captured that flavor, and I liked the dramatic version as well, but it was very sort of like. It was kind of sappy and emotional, and whereas his, I feel like captured the sort of madness of that scene, so well.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think he's got a magic touch. It's just like it's not too much and not too little. It's just the right amount of uh the combination of potty humor and intelligent humor has always been something that I've loved. All
Yeah.
my favorite
Yeah.
comics. I don't like it when somebody's so intellectual that they can't appreciate the awkwardness of someone farting in the middle of the room or whatever.
Well, I mean,
And then at the same time, you don't want to just see that all
right.
the time. So it's very it's fun to have sort of a mix of that.
Yeah, what's whiskey barrels?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
I mean,
See,
that was the first thing I saw from Henry's Kitchen, and I just like as I started to see it coming together, it was killing me. It's like watching a slow moving train, and you just can't get off the tracks.
that's exactly what I was trying to do.
I wanted to go back to something you said in the beginning about, being a musician and not having the sort of diligence to go and practice to a metronome. And, you made a joke about your timing as a guitarist. And I thought the irony of that statement was that clearly timing is one of the most important things in comedy, and it may just be that you were in the wrong time scale, like the quarter note and the eighth note, was not your subdivision. You needed the long scope of the joke, to find your timing, because clearly your timing's impeccable, in comedy, and the musical the way that the musical side informs that, it's like it's a tempo and it's a time scale thing almost.
Well, yeah, just to get super specific on that, the intro music on the Henry's Kitchen stuff, where it cuts is like it's so perfect musically. Like you couldn't pick a more perfect place. Like there'll just be this song playing. It cuts like it's like a third of the way into a word. Like it's perfect. So I just wanted to say specifically those cuts are genius.
I love, well, I watch a lot of these real videos of people doing it. I mean, one of the best viral videos of all time for me is called Who Needs a Movie? And it's a Canadian couple, and they're trying to promote their filming business, where they're like, we'll film your wedding or whatever, but they're so bad. And the poor wife looks like she's got a gun to her head. She's just like, we can film your wedding or your anniversary, but it's like, but what I always am startled by is when the cut happens and it's somebody just
stuck.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, if you're in control of the editing, are they just going like, well, I better leave a good buffer in there to make sure I don't cut into a word. So instead you cut way early. I love that. That's always so funny to me.
I think there's a kind of modern version of that happening because you watch a lot of these younger, like Instagram skit type comedians. And I think they're initially, before everything got super professionally produced, they were doing all their editing on their phone. So almost sometimes it's like a technical problem because you can't actually make the cut where you want to make the cut. So you end up with thumb or something. You end up with that perfect amount of awkward action space.
But I spend so much time like the music that you're talking about cutting into the song or whatever. I spend an insane amount of time trying to figure out where the right place is because I don't want it to be at a beat because then it sounds like it's intentional, so you have to pick. Anyway, sorry.
That's like singing out of tune, intentionally is actually, like way out of tune. It's actually much harder than you think, because all the momentum wants to put you somewhere in the range of the note. In relation to this sort of the way that you do some research on your stuff, it reminds me of a guy called Kyle Mooney. Do you know him? He went on to SNL, but he kind of blew up from YouTube videos before.
What's the name again?
Kyle Mooney.
Kyle Mooney. Yeah.
Okay, so I almost feel like his best stuff was that stuff before he was discovered, on YouTube. And he describes how he kind of got to that. He would just troll YouTube and find videos that had 8 views, of like a kid who was reviewing a candy or something because he had seen, that's a thing like YouTube reviews of candy. And, the sort of dark part of the internet where there's nothing wrong or sinister with it, but the fact that it's so self-unaware is almost like a perfect character, gave him these deep characters, and I feel like that comes through as well.
Yeah, the internet gave us a whole new bunch of fodder to make fun of, Just
So, you must be a good cook.
believe it or not, I'm not. And I've thought about this with music also. It's like there's some people, like I'm a by the book person when it comes to cooking. Like I'm just like, okay, so like I'm in a laboratory or something. It says it wants half a teaspoon, so I'm going to put exactly half a teaspoon.
Right.
I set the timer exactly. I even do a joke where it's like, if it says 18 to 20 minutes, that means 19 minutes. Like it's got to, if it says boil your pasta for 9 to 11 minutes, that means 10. I don't know why they're saying 9 or 11. It's 10 because that's the one in between. But that's how by the book I am with all this stuff. And it doesn't work. But then you'll be with somebody who is just naturally a great cook. And they're like, what are you doing? You're putting way too much salt in that. Well, that's how much the thing says. Yeah, but that's because it's offset by this and blah, blah, blah. And then there's some people that just have a natural ability to do it. And I do not have that. I'll put way too much oil on stuff. It's really hard to find out what the right amount of cooking to be done is. And
so I guess you're saying there's an element of truth again in what you're doing. Like,
yeah,
it's partially reflecting reality, the Henry's Kitchen.
Oh, especially on Twitch. I literally just let the camera capture me trying to do it for real. I had a really fortunate moment the other day. It looked like I was doing it as a joke, but I was trying to crush nuts on this plate, and so I had a mallet, and I put like something over it, and I started hammering it, and then the plate completely shattered, and then
I saw
dawned on me. I was like, oh, I guess of course that's going to happen. I'm banging the plate with a mallet, but it was so stupid. But honestly, that was literally just, I was like, that's not the joke that I was going for, but it kind of worked out perfect.
So then you must have cut yourself then, because a lot of the comments are about your knife technique. It's legendary.
Yes. Well, I started just using a spreading knife to cut everything, and it's a lot more difficult, but a lot safer. So, but yeah, it's like music too. I was always jealous of those people that just. In fact, speaking of John Frizzell, he and I were recently. I can't remember if I shared it with him or the other way around, but there was a clip of Tom Petty talking about how he wrote his song "Waiting," the Waiting, and just to hear him play, it was just such a natural clock. It was just like he doesn't come off as like some kind of academic or intellectual or something like that. He just has this natural ability. Like as soon as he started playing the intro to the song, it was just like, wow, that sounds so good. And it's just one chord, but it's just the rhythm, natural rhythm of it.
It's like, in the body, I think, and now that these guys have got kids and nieces and all that kind of stuff, it's like it's not. It is exactly that. It's not cerebral. I even think cooking's in the body. It's like the way you
just from watching like how the girls just
basically. I think everyone actually does have it, and it just gets inhibited and fucked up early in life, And it's like dancing, like we never grew up dancing, but I think people dancing badly is so funny to me though. It's one of my favorite things to watch is people struggling to dance. It's
well, because it's the internal struggle that goes on inside them that I know very well.
Right.
Like, I want to look cool. I just want to have fun. I don't know what I'm doing. Does this look stupid? Like you're actually watching the external manifestation. But also that they have
this thing that they've lived with their entire life, and they just can't tell it what to do. It just doesn't do what they want to do.
I think you're right. There is probably a natural thing that gets interrupted somehow because, with dancing, you suddenly are thinking about what other people are thinking of you while you're doing it. And there's probably with music, one of the problems is, I was always anticipating. I wasn't really in the moment. I was trying to think of some other aspect of the musical thing.
I don't know if you're aware of a piano player called Keith Jarrett. He's sort of a legendary.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, okay. So I mean, we grew up listening to that, quite intensely. It was just become one of our favorite artists of all time. But I was listening to an interview of his, and he said something, kind of obvious, but also profound, which was that his sort of entire job of his brain or his consciousness during playing is to not inhibit what his body, knows what to do. And that's where his effort has to go. And, he played with guys like Miles, and Miles Davis has a similar sort of sentiment where he said, I could see a guy pick up his instrument and I knew if he was good or not, that there's some sort of physicality to your relationship with your instrument or your relationship with your own body, that it informs whether you can do it or not, and I think
that's very interesting. And I think probably not just with music, but with anything. Yeah. You could probably tell if somebody's a pro. Mm. Well, here's an example. This is not a guy who knows what he's doing with a knife.
but he knows how to get a laugh. That's clear.
Yeah. But yeah, that is very interesting that you could. Have you guys seen these videos? I don't know if this is related or not, but there's one video. Maybe I'll send it to you on Twitter or something like that. But it's like 11 minutes long, and it's how to play a gong, they're standing right in front of this huge gong with the mallet. It's been so long since I've seen it, but yeah, I think the guy's just like, so this is sort of the inner part. This is going to make that kind of sound or whatever. And the whole time you're going, just hit the fucking gong. Literally, he never, ever hits the gong, even throughout the end of the video. And I'm just like, this is amazing. Like, he's just,
Are you sure it's not some kind of like Buddhist or Zen koan sort of like, there's some deep spiritual message in that?
Yeah. It's like he's giving a whole music lesson without playing one. It's like, come on, hit the thing already. We want to hear what it sounds like, and he never does. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, there's so many sort of life insights in that kind of thing, because I have I have now 3 young kids, but 2 that I'm teaching piano. And it's so hard to remind yourself of what it feels like to be 3 years old or 6 years old, when someone's trying to teach you something, and that impatience of just, stop touching my hands, let me fucking do it,
Oh yeah.
And you get reminded of that, and I don't know. I feel like if you could somehow get back to that level, get into that mindset of somebody who's learning something or doing something for the first time, it's so hard, but in a way you get to like revisit it, with a kid.
Yeah. No, I think, I gave guitar lessons a lot too. And so I sort of learned what those things are that beginner guitar players do that is so hilarious. It's just putting their finger just off the fret enough so that it just makes a buzzing noise, and, stopping and saying, wait, and all that kind of stuff.
That's not how it goes. Yeah.
Well, listen, man, this has been an awesome conversation.
Yeah.
If you ever come through Texas, Austin area, we've got to make sure we do this again in person in the studio here. And
I'd love it. And I will, because I love going to Austin. It's a great place. I was just there in October and had a blast. Love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If it happens for whatever reason, you do get into the studio, I think it'd be so cool, to record, if you're open to it, one of your songs or one of your, bits, like, cause we're way into the sort of the production side, the technical side. A lot of what we do is outside of our band even, and so I think that it's just, it is, especially when we get to interview guys like you or Todd Glass, who we kind of happened upon in a similar way at a time, when TV was on TV, like before everything was on YouTube or streaming. And so those sort of connections and the sort of how you become a fan of somebody at that time in your life or at that time in media when it wasn't so sort of blasé and sort of jaded, like it was there. It's really cool to get to talk to you guys in this format and like dig into what you were thinking when you made the stuff that like really clicked with us. So thank you so much for coming on. And
for sure. And I'd love to do that. That'd be fun. And yeah, I should make a quick note. Todd is one of my not only one of my favorite people, but one of my favorite funny people, like comedians. he's incredible. Like he just
yeah.
And how he's translated to sort of this modern, young format of social media and stuff. He just kind of nails it, and when, in the interview with him, there's a similar sort of emotional component that I personally get from you, which is a genuine sort of want to, I don't know, put some positivity out there, even if there's sort of cynicism or there's behind the jokes is a little bit of ribbing and stuff like that. He seemed to genuinely want to put something, unironically be a positive person, Yes. And he's not ironic about that. And there's so much irony, like irony is funny when it has its place, but with himself, with his inner self, he seems to not be ironic, and I appreciate that. I get a similar thing from you.
Yeah, no, when Todd's in people that are my age and older. There's a lot of resentment because of the business changing. I'm sure in the music world too. People are like, I don't want to get a fucking podcast. I want to go to a club and do what I do best, but they don't want to embrace you can't stop the world from changing. All you can do is say, all right, well, how am I going to find my little place in this new world that we're in?
Yeah.
And if you're open to it, you'll eventually get there. And Todd is a huge inspiration to me because he's always embracing wherever things go. And I do have memories of him like standing around when we were at the Improv, and there were a couple of other comics that were just sort of like everything that came out of their mouth was about this sucks and so sucks and I can't do this and blah, blah, blah. And Todd's energy was the exact opposite. He was being funny, he was making everybody laugh. And he's, how can you not want to be around that kind of energy? It's great.
Yeah. He said those exact same things. He's just no interest in being negative, which I like being negative sometimes. I've
noticed, we all do.
Yeah.
What an asshole.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess I just try to catch myself if I'm doing it. And I'm like, because when you're hanging out with somebody that's all that they're doing, it's not a lot of fun.
It's draining.
Yeah, if you agree with every word that they're saying, you could agree with every word that they're saying, but you're just like, I don't feel like sitting here and just saying this stuff over and over again. It doesn't feel good, It's fun to think of creative things.
Is there anything you want to sort of plug, or something that's upcoming? Or
I love telling people to get on the Henry's Kitchen train and just start going to YouTube and looking at them. There's like at least 50 of them, I think, out there. And you can watch my entire comedy special on my website, henryphillips.com, for free. If I have dates, I put them up there. When are you guys? When will people see this?
We'll probably air it next Monday out on our Twitch, our Twitch is really small. We're just kind of getting started there. Yeah. But then it'll go out on all the podcast platforms like, an hour after that. So it'll be next Monday. What would that be? 20 something?
Yeah, well, if they're in the LA area. Wait, so that's not this Monday.
I don't even know what. Yeah, we'll be next Monday. What is
20th,
that? 20th.
Yeah. I find that people have different definitions of what this Monday and next Monday is. But I don't have one or the other. But yeah, so this coming Monday, in that case, that Friday, so a week from this Friday, I'm doing a big show in LA at the Ice House in Pasadena. Where I'm heading, and there'll be a great lineup of comics too. So if they are anywhere in the greater Los Angeles area, then definitely check that out. And that's on the website also.
Okay. Great, man.
Right on.
Keep the funny tweets coming too. I always enjoy your tweets. I don't know if that's a collective decision or what.
Listen, we need encouragement like that because we're all such reluctant tweeters, if that's the right word.
It can be terrifying. Yeah, I mean, sometimes you just want to delete it immediately. You're like, oh no, that's dumb. And then I think this is just a fun little Twitter story because my friend Mark Cohen, who's one of my really good friends. He's the one who played Stupid Joe in Punching the Clown. He was like my nemesis or whatever, but he never tweeted. He just never was not a big tweeter, but he had an account. And I guess his daughter, his like 6-year-old daughter at the time or whatever, got on his phone and just wrote, "I'm going to stab you." Which is really messed up. But she turned out to be a wonderfully healthy young lady. But it was just for whatever reason she typed, "I'm going to stab you" in his Twitter, and it went out. And Mark is a comic, so he's got all these people watching it, and it was all like lowercase too, with like the not punctuation. It just said, "I'm going to stab you," and it got likes by like all these like hilarious people like Karen Kilgariff, who's a genius, like a dark sense of humor. She must have just been like, "That is funny," so you just never know what's going to end up being. I mean, he was really upset. He's like, "What? Why'd you do that? You just wrote, 'I'm going to stab you.'" Like, there's no intention to be funny at all, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is great." You never know.
I do harvest the funny things that my daughter says. Because I feel like we keep a shared note, my wife and I, because she says some like extremely funny stuff and profound stuff, and I do feel like I could just start an account posting this stuff and it'd probably get more likes and followers than our own stuff.
That's definitely a thing for sure.
All right, man. Well, great to talk to you. Thanks for coming on, and look forward to catching everything you're doing on Twitch and elsewhere.
Thank you guys very much for having me on. This was a lot of fun. And I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. See you, Henry.
See ya.
You guys.
See ya. Cheers.